So with the JP side of things getting a free 5-star ticket for their 30 million download campaign, I thought I would go ahead and put out a little ranking over here for what servant would be worth picking if you are a new player on JP or you're an NA player and you want to be planning in the next 2 years for who you want to go ahead and pick. Or maybe you're looking at this video, 2 years in the future and you're like, all right, let me look at this guy's video and see what was good at the time and who I'm going to pick when we finally get this on NA. For whatever reason, this is going to be a video to help you out, but it's not going to be a real traditional tier list. You'll notice it's not like S, A, B, C, D. I'm giving them actual individual reasons for why I'm putting a servant there to kind of help out newer players and see my reasoning for why those servants are in those tiers. Now, also, right before we get into this, there are a lot of servants on this tier list that you're going to see that are going to end up in stuff like C or B tier. That does not mean that they are bad. A lot of servants in FGO can be subpar, but still usable, right? Like take me, for instance. I really like Ruler Artoria on NA right now, but I know she's not the best until she gets her buff in like 2 years, but I'm still going to use her. I know she's not crazy. I would still rank her rather low, but you can get away with using servants that aren't the best for a given situation or just don't have the best kits, right? So if you see somebody in the C or B tier, do not feel bad if you want to go ahead and pick them. I'm going to give a couple of reasonings. I went ahead and, wrote down a bunch of my reasonings over here so I can kind of go through and, pre-rank all these so I know where everybody's going. I can kind of talk about it as we get into this video. And so, I'll go ahead and give some justifications for some of the servants, even if they end up a little bit lower. So as long as we got all that out of the way, let's start jumping right into this. So starting off with Altera, she's kind of going into this falling off territory. And that's not because she's not usable. She's fine as an AoE Buster Saber. I mean, she certainly could be better, but realistically, she's getting ranked lower because the other two AoE Buster Sabers that are right next to her are just absolutely insane. Now, Artoria, I will say, is one of these insane servants that if you can bag her because you didn't get her for free for the Stay Night campaign or you just haven't pulled her on a random banner, she's exceptional. She does a lot of just massive damage. Like, she's really good for just obliterating people. The caveat is, though, if you don't have Koyanskaya, she's probably not as high of a priority. If you don't have Koyanskaya, maybe consider going for Mordred, who I don't consider base to base as good as Artoria, but when you take Koyanskaya out of the picture, then Mordred's probably more of a more worthwhile servant, having more of a overall fleshed out kit, where Artoria is pretty much full in on doing damage, being an exceptional farming unit, where Mordred is a really good farming unit and can also be pretty good when going into CQs because she does have the ability to do some nasty crits. So just do keep that in mind. If you don't have Koyanskaya, it might be a caveat of going for Mordred instead of Artoria. Then we have the Dioscuri, which I think this is going to get a couple of people a little upset, but I am not putting them quite in that tippy top tier because I think where I would have had them there a couple of years ago, they're starting to slowly lose a little bit of their luster to me. Not a whole bunch. They're still a very good overall choice. Having Pierce Invincibility and Pierce Defense on your NP is exceptional. It is those one-turn buffs that they have on a lot of their skills that are really starting to get a bit annoying because you'll notice them having these drastic fall-offs whenever their skills go down. Now, it is still nice that their quick cards basically become arts cards and their arts cards become quick cards. That ability on the first skill I still think is very powerful. Would like to see them get a buff, but I do think there is another single target arts unit on this list that might be a bit more worthwhile for going for. But again, not a bad choice at all whatsoever. Now, Arjuna over here, that is just straight copium. I know that there's going to be people in the comments that are going to say, well, he's not as bad as you think he's going to be. He's pretty much debuff immune for the entirety of the fight, but realistically, who cares, man? I mean, even if you get him as a copium servant, that they're going to give him a buff that fixes him, that might at best put him up into like this C and B range over here. Like this, they're not bad, but he's going to still need another buff. Like, unless they go all out for Arjuna, which with his track record, I don't think they ever will. They just do not, like, they've abandoned Archer Arjuna for Berserker Arjuna. So like, just wouldn't even concern myself with this guy. And then, I mean, Artemis, I'm sure you could probably make an argument to put them into this kind of falling off tier because technically they are pretty decent against males. Problem is, Uriel exists as a free-to-play 3-star that is in every single banner. So just why ever go for Artemis when the 3-star is her, but better, right? Like, she's just better than Artemis is over here, which is a bit unfortunate for her. Now, in C, it's going can make, again, I think some people a little upset, but I do think in the context of our AoE, you know, archers, especially Buster archers, Napoleon is falling off a little bit. When you have these insanely powerful options, like say Gilgamesh, or you have even Tamatomo, who's really good at building up and getting stronger throughout a fight, or Tesla over here, who I think is one of the baller servants, I don't think, you know, it's really worth going for Napoleon. But if you need somebody to hit that divinity power mod niche, I could kind of see you maybe going for that, or you just really like Napoleon. He's fine, but there are just better options. I mean, getting into, you know, Tesla and Tamatomo, what does Tesla not do? I mean, they just give this guy the most insane buffs back to back to back. I mean, he's got like good team support. He's got the big battery. He's got big damage. He's got good power mods. I mean, dude can even like just stun for CQs with survivability because they gave him a gut. So realistically, you can bring this guy anywhere and he's going to do really good work. Tamatomo, I really like. I understand that I am biased towards Tamatomo because reading the event, I was like, this guy is super sick. So I realize that I'm a little bit, I have a bit of a mecha bias towards him, but I still think he's in this like mid-range tier where like if you use him, you'll get some solid usage out of him. You can use him as a Buster farmer and he'll be fine. If you use him in CQs, he'll do fairly well, but he's got a few weird kinks to him, right? Where he just has to build up to do this really insane damage, and he has a power mod, but it's not the most insane power mod. It's not like the most common thing. Like, it's not Earth or Man attribute, you know? It's not like one of those big heavy hitter ones. And so I'm just having him kind of in that like middle of the road, you know, kind of pack where he's solid enough. You'll get some decent usage out of him. You might break him out every now and then, but not the craziest guy. Then we have Enkidu over here. Hesitant to put them into the like absolute top tier, but Enkidu is rather good. They gave him a 50% battery, so now is he not only just pretty decent if you want to bring him as like a solo servant or just a boss killer, but you can also use him in 90++ now because he does really big damage and he has the 50% battery, so he's just useful. Even if you don't have Koyan Sky for those 111 nodes, you could still use him with something like a double Castoria because double Castoria gives you 60% with both of their charismas combined. He has his own 50% battery, so he's still a very solid option. Like, he's one of the ones that I could very easily be convinced to slide him up in there. I'm just not sure, you know, if I want to have a whole bunch of guys in this S tier option. I want to have like a nice bell curve here, so I'm leaving him in A, but just understand that I could see the argument for him being one of those high-end picks. Then we have Karna. Karna, I think, is just, as opposed to Arjuna, they just give this guy everything. They fixed his battery, his base damage is really good, Divinity's a really good power mod. He gets free bonus damage because he just smacks people with the Buster down. The dude is just really, really strong. The only thing he's really lacking is any kind of defensive ability or some way to kind of be decent into challenge quests. I mean, what, he's got the NP seal, that's kind of it, but, you know, kind of like an Artoria to an extent, but kind of bridging the gap between these two over here where, you know, he could do some decent crits. He's a good farmer, got a good power mod. I think he's just overall a very solid choice. And if you really like costumes, well, now he's got two of them. Bradamante, I think, is another one of those like bordering on A or S tier because realistically, she's just a quick Black Grail farmer. She's just really good if you have the Ruler Scotties and you want to have a quick servant that can do Black Grail farming for you. Might maybe just consider picking Bradamante. I know on my alt JP account, I haven't picked my free servant for finishing Fuyuki yet, and I'm considering picking Bradamante because I have Ruler Scotty over there. I don't really have an exceptional quick guy, so I'm like, I just pick Bradamante for that. So if that helps, you know, just you kind of think about it, she's not just a pretty face, she's also really good if you need somebody to just obliterate enemies, right? Then we move over, and I have to do this with a heavy heart. You guys know that I love me my Lancer Artorias. I mean, I went on the rant at the beginning of this video talking about how much I love using Ruler Artoria, and unfortunately, I wanted to put this unit so much higher when we were doing the Buster AoE Lancer video, but she just kind of has a disappointing performance. If they buff her one-turn buffs so that with Koyenskaya you could loop and stack them on top of each other instead of just kind of looping them back, you'd be able to use the skills twice and they would stack. I think that would help her out a lot, but realistically, it's just her damage is not super great. I mean, the Pierce Invul on NP is nice, but you really need to give her a bit more than that last buff that they gave her. Vitra is a servant that I know I was a little bit harsh on for like the first 2 years that I was using her, but I'm starting to come around on her a little bit more. As a farmer, she's okay. I still don't really like the third skill very much, only giving you one buff of NP damage while also giving you the regenerating NP because you kind of want that up to guarantee she'll loop because sometimes her looping can be a little iffy. But then, you know, you also want to save the NP damage for the last wave where the enemies are the largest, but, you know, she's still fine. Like, she's still okay. She doesn't have the largest power mod, but anti-divinity is always going to be rather decent. You'll get some decent mileage out of this servant. Same thing for someone like Achilles. Achilles, when they gave him the buff that allows him to stack crit damage on his NP, I think is nice. He's not the craziest looper. I did a lot of research looking around and could not find a video where someone was able to do black grail farming with him, which is like, okay, like I didn't think he would be able to, but I guess that kind of puts him a little bit behind on the times with some quick units. I don't doubt it's possible though, because he's a rider. You find quick, you fight against casters. So someone in the comments can let me know with their own Achilles if they've been able to get black grail farming done with this guy, but I was not able to find anything. But even then, still, not like the craziest kit, you know, he's like fine, right? You know, he's like a decent servant, like nothing too bad. Maybe if we're able to see that he's able to do black grail farming, if someone in the comments can confirm that with, again, their own Achilles, then I might want to bump him up to A, because then he could just be a very solid option. But also, farming against casters is not exactly the hardest thing to do. You know, that's not going to be one of those things that you really have to fight over, because, you know, your Berserkers can handle that, your Alter Egos can handle that. I mean, your AoE Avengers can handle that. So he's not exactly holding the hardest position. Europa's a little bit sad. Her kit is decent. Please just give her a buff. That's all I can really say. If you go for this servant, you're kind of hoping that they throw her just a decent buff her way, because then she'll be a halfway decent servant. I mean, her skills ain't bad. It's just, when are you ever going to break out this servant? Especially when you also could just pick Ozzy as a rider. This guy that just does everything. He supports the team. He does good damage. He has utility in the fact that, like, he's turning on your guys that have, you know, chance-based buffs. You know, he seals the enemy's NP. You know, he's just doing, like, giving NP to everybody. He's just a solid overall server. Like, bro is just good all around. Same thing for Drake. I think Drake is actually a very solid option. I don't know if I want to slot her completely into this S tier, but I definitely want to have her like very high, because essentially she can be your free-to-play version of Iskandar, and we all know how good Iskandar is. You know, he got really nutty overnight, but she kind of has the benefit of having that 50% battery, which I think Iskandar only has the 30, so sometimes in corner cases, you might need to use, you know, Drake over Iskandar, right? Like, maybe you don't have your own Oberon, but you do have Koya and Skya. That makes her compatible with, say, a plug suit Waver, or worst case scenario, you plug suit a Scotty or something because you just need the 50% battery, but you know, she's definitely not a bad pick. Odysseus, on the other hand, I think is kind of in the same position as Europa, where they have not given him anything, and he's still solid. You can get some decent mileage out of him, but he's kind of like lacking things that modern servants are wanting to have. Again, one of those servants that you could pick. It kind of makes me sad in particular, because I really like with Hamatomo, like, you know, I'm a mecha fan, so I really like Odysseus, and I'm kind of tempted to pick him myself, but I'm like, man, I just give him something so he can be a little bit better, right? Like, his kit is starting to like show its age just a little bit. Now, Nemo over here, I think, is one of those servants that you could probably slide up and down this list, because I'm going with the kind of middle of the pack, because he's one of those guys that if you set him up properly, he could be really insane. Like, you're fighting the right opponents in the right area, all that's good stuff, blah, blah, blah. He could be doing really insane damage, but if you're not doing that, or you don't want to set him up, or you can't set him up, you might not be doing as crazy damage. So, kind of throwing him in there just also for the annoyance of having to set this servant up. This one is a little bit sad to me, because Ketz is one of the first servants that I really went a baller on when I was playing the game. But they need to give her a buff, man. Like, I can't cope just because I really like Ketz and say that, oh, go after Ketz. You know, she's super popular. We all love Ketz. But unfortunately, Queso Quado over here is just kind of showing age a little bit. I mean, if they toss her above, she'll be really good. She has the basis to be a very strong servant. Battery, star weight, you know, she has the Buster buff, has the crit buff, bomb stars and stuff, does the same NP ceiling that not Odysseus, but Ozymandias does. It's just, some of these buffs are for like one turn, or the values are just a little lower than we would like them to be, or her damage is not quite hitting those same levels that we're kind of expecting in current era. So just toss her something and she could easily shoot up a couple of slots. I mean, look at what happened to Ozymandias when they focused on him and gave him a couple of buffs, but I suspect that's because the Camelot movies were coming out and they're like, okay, we got to make sure this servant is really, really good. So I don't know, maybe re-release Babylonia or something, and then, you know, Quetzalcoatl can get some buffs. Maybe that's what they'll do. Maybe over here is just kind of like Ozzy over here, but hey, she has a power mod. She supports, she's got the battery, she's got the power mod. She's just an overall good servant all around. I mean, there's nothing that I can really complain about with Maeve. Again, another one of those servants that benefited because they were in a story chapter. You know, Maeve, I believe, only was starting to get some love because they're like, we're going to put her in Lost Belt 6 as Nocnaria, you know? So, I'm not salty about that at all. You know, I'm not. Look, I like Maeve, but I'm just come on, like help Quetzalcoatl out a little bit. Taigong, I think Taigong is ridiculous. I don't think this guy's really aged today. The fact that you could still do double Taigong setups, I mean, for the last Lotto event that happened on JP and Christmas, you could just do Taigong for the 90 plus plus, or the 90 plus. No, my bad. Don't do. I don't think it was for the 90 plus plus. It was for the 90 plus. You just bring double Taigong because they just give each other all the buffs they could ever want. Super nice, super fun. So he's just a very solid investment if you need kind of like a pseudo quick buffer that can also kind of be your looper and damage dealer. He's very good for those reasons. Anastasia, last buff was not what she needed. She's got the pieces, right? Like you've got like a very interesting charisma, you've got Pierce Invul, you have like the stun effect, and you have a 50% battery, but you just don't feel very good to use. You know, just kind of lacking in areas. But again, one of those servants that if they would just actually give her a buff that she needs and can appreciate, I'm sure she'll be really good. But unfortunately, they kind of want to shoo her into that challenge quest area, and I don't know, she probably needs another buff going in. Like, she needs a buff if they wanted to be a farmer or a CQ servant to kind of solidify her role in one way or the other. Sanzo over here, I'm very tempted to put into, like, the S tier, but she's... Okay, I don't want to let my own bias overtake me, so just know that I would put her in S tier because I love Sanzo and I think she's ridiculous, but I don't want to be too biased on this servant. But third skill being a phenomenal support skill with the ability to taunt and take the heat off your supports for a turn while also having good damage, and for 90 plus being pretty self-sustaining. If you do her a pen skill with her battery, you just click the button and she can do any, like, you should take anybody out, right? Because 80% plus the 20% append gets her 100% of her NP, which is just ridiculous, right? That's super nice for her. Again, want to put her in S tier, but I'm trying to not let my bias overtake me. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Scheherazade, I'm still salty about year 3 spooking me when I was summoning for Scotty. I'm trying to not let my bias overtake me to put her in D tier, but you know, she could give the party guts. She's anti-king, I guess, and that is all the niceness you're going to get out of me against this servant, because I'm still salty. I mean, I got Scotty back eventually, so I probably should forgive her on that. It's not like it's her fault, but oh man, we all have those servants that we've been spooked by that you just get upset about whenever you see them like, you again. The supports are obviously ridiculously insane. I'm trying to run Tamamo propaganda on the channel, you know, using her to beat some of those like big enemies and whatnot. So you guys can go check those out. I think I uploaded a couple of those last week. The Tamamo propaganda is strong. She is still a very good servant, just not nearly as good as like Castoria, and Lady Avalon has kind of taken her job. But hey, reducing skill cooldown is always going to be good. And Waver's just the jack of all trades, master of none. Is he the best support in the game? No, but does he do like just kind of everything pretty fine? Yeah, 50% to one person, 20% to everybody else. Attack, defense, damage cut, crit, those things are all good. And NP is still one of the better support NPs in the game. I mean, it's still just very solid. Then we move over to Asaka Behime. Now, I know some people are going to say, why is she not an S tier? She's, like, really good. I mean, they gave her a buff. Now she can buff, you know, quick and buster guys. But realistically, she is good, but she's going to be, like, one of those characters that you pick and then you just kind of never, ever use. You're going to never break her out. So, for the sake of, like, not making people go pick Asaka Behime, I'll put her in A, because you can do some funny things with her. I mean, she could technically be a solo servant stacking up to like 100% defense, so she takes no damage or whatever. But like, are you realistically going to do that? Are you going to do like a 35-minute run of just sitting around? Unless you really like Asaka Behime, probably not. So again, solid enough servant, but you're probably not going to use her. Dude, Jack is hard carried by her female power mod. I mean, we could probably even just realistically kick her down, because if the anti-male thing over here doesn't save Artemis, then I mean, it's not even like a full female power mod that Jack has. It's not going to save her. Yes, her refund is really crazy. You can get mad refund on this, but when you're just smacking the enemy for pitiful amounts of damage, I mean, you just have better options. Instead of bringing Jack with, like, what, her 50% female power mod, just bring anybody else that has, like, a full 150% power mod against that enemy that's an Earth or a Man or is, like, a Sky attribute opponent, which I know is a little bit more rare. But again, you could break a lawful, good, evil alignment. Like, we have other power mods that you don't need to stoop down to the level of using a servant that really does not have that much of a functional kit. I mean, she still has the issue of the year 1 problem of the survivability and the damage skill still being on the same skill, which is even more annoying with how long these fights tend to go on nowadays. Kashi and Koji, I love this servant, dude. I absolutely love Kashin Koji. I think she's absolutely phenomenal. I think she's got a very good kit. I love servants that can just put their power mod on anybody, especially when it's bound, so it gets her on stun immunities and whatnot. You put that on them, blow them up, and guess what? She can Black Grail farm, because I wanted to do some research on this. I wanted to see if I could justify an S tier, and yeah, she can Black Grail farm. Apparently, you do need to invest in her append skills, but hey, if you do that, she is capable of Black Grail farming if you do have the 3 Scotties. So, you know, I'm putting her up there, right? I'm throwing her up there, being like, you know what? Black Grail farming servant that also just has good mods, has a very solid kit, tossing her up there. Li Shuin, I can't put him in this like bottom tier because I know his kit's not the craziest. I'm not the biggest outspoken fan of how they kind of just made him a one-turn Andy, but hey, at the very least, he can do really good damage and he can bypass those defenses. So if you just need someone to punch somebody really hard once, then I guess Li Shuin is your guy. Hey, I mean, he gets a little bit better with Tamamo because Tamamo lowers those skill cooldowns. You get those skills back and start punching people harder more frequently. Just saying, if you want to make Li Shuin work, maybe that's an option. Vlad over here is very close. I think he's like hovering between A and S tier, which is kind of a meme because when he spawned in the game, he was not very good. But they have really done a number on this guy. Having NP control, having a battery, just generic, you know, attack and defense buffs are always going to be very solid. An art servant that bomb stars on an NP that they buffed twice, and with the ability to have a stackable secondary guts, which realistically, I don't feel like every time that I've used Vlad that the second guts has really come up, but every now and then when you do have it, it is nice. So just overall, if you need yourself a single target servant, maybe I will just put him up there as like for your single target option. I do think the dude is really, really solid. I think he is very, very strong if you do need to snag yourself just a guy that needs to do single target damage. Zhang Yu over here, I'm a little bit biased, but I'm gonna put him in C. Bro is not very good at looping. He can drop some stars and do some mad crits, and that's really about it. Like, I'm kind of sorry, as much as I think the I guess the lore or the history of the real Zhang Yu is really cool, even though it's kind of hard to track down, or at least when I was looking for it. I think that dude is super dope. I like what they did with him in FGO. I think he's real cool. Unfortunately, did not really translate to the kit very well, and they tried to buff him and it was kind of nice, but realistically it's copium at this point. Same thing for Nightingale. Nightingale, I know we all like the hot nurse and everyone's going to want to say that no, she's at least C tier, but realistically, this is a cope servant that is carried. I mean, literally a Gouda Gouda poster girl merchant, right? Like, if you do not have poster girl, what are you using this servant for? And even then, do you not have better options? Can you not bring Chen Gong as a 1-star option, or no, a 2-star option that costs way less to kind of just get the same value out of, or even more value, because at least he has the taunt, the defense, plus the buster buff, and hey, if they're a berserker, they also get crit damage buffs. I know they gave her the additional buff, but it's just like, it's cope. It's cope, man. It's cope. When are you going to use this servant over anybody else? Like, not only do you have low rarity options, but like, if you've pulled for any of the decent supports, I mean, you're just going to use somebody like Merlin, or you're going to bring the second Koyan, or you're just going to bring Oberon, right? Like, it's just cope, man. It's just cope. As much as I want it to not be, I think it's copium. I think it's absolute copium. Galatea, I really enjoy Galatea. I think she's a very, very strong servant. Kind of going between her and Vlad. I do think I prefer Vlad a little bit more, but that's because between the two, Vlad is the more offensive option, Galatea is the more defensive option, right? Like, Galatea's got a little bit more staying power, Vlad's got a bit more offensive pressure, you know, dropping the stars and critting the enemy, as opposed to, you know, like healing, cleansing debuffs, you know, getting the 100% defense to kind of eat 2 hits. You know, Vlad it's just whatever you prefer. You know, this could be swapped around if you're more of a defensive player. You know, you might value her a little bit more, but I tend to find that as long as you're kind of hitting the enemy and you're kind of just smacking them for big damage, you're going to be doing better, especially if you're getting this servant at NP1. You know, trying to stall the enemy out with your NP1 servant, you're eventually going to get caught, especially on a berserker. So I'd rather just try to take them out as fast as possible, especially when, again, we got a double buffed NP, so our damage ain't half bad. Kualter, very phenomenal solo servant. I mean, the one buff they gave to his NP, I think, was more than enough to give him, because now does he not only have more damage, but he also says, you cannot run, you cannot hide, give me those defensive buffs, get spiked, you know, just absolutely obliterates them. Does have a little less staying power than some other survivability servants, but they try to offset that with just the raw damage you can do with this guy. I think he's still very, very strong. Highly recommend this servant. Now, Zhana, I'm not sure if I can put in S tier because I've used her a bit, haven't played with her as much as I would like to, but for what I've seen, she is a very, very good support now. The NP is very strong. The defense lowering that she was able to do previously does like come up to give you some really good damaging turns. And then now that they kind of made her more of a specialized art support, I mean, again, art servants and eating name a more iconic duo, you know? But she fits in really nice if you don't have a Castoria, if you don't have a Proto Merlin, and say you have, you know, your own Zhu Fu and you have Jean, when those quests or advanced quests comes around that just tell you can't bring a friend support, having a Jean plus a Zhu Fu gives you a really strong core for, you know, not having to rely on a friend Castoria or a friend Proto Merlin. You know, I think she just does a lot for the team, and even if you don't have Proto Merlin, I mean, she gives you the one thing Castoria doesn't, and that's healing. You know, that gives you additional ways to regenerate your HP, which I think is very nice. I mean, what is it? Still the 5% defense at NP1 is still cope, but you know, shrug. I mean, you can't do everything perfectly, right? You can only be so good. Janako, I think I'm not gonna put her in D. That's a little bit of personal bias after reading Lost Belt 4. I think she's pretty dope. But, you know, she's got a solid charisma. You know, her charisma is fine. You know, you could do some funny looping, quote-unquote, looping scenarios with her NP where you can have, like, invincible turns that loop into another invincible turn if your RNG is pretty good and you've got the buffs for it. But yeah, I do think she's realistically a little bit of cope, but hey man, it's my list. If I want to say that you can use her as a bit of a copium servant, let me say that you can use her a little bit as a copium servant, right? Some people will say, what about Nightingale? And then I'm going to just move on to Nitocris over here, who I do think is a very solid option. This is probably the servant I'm going to be picking on my main JP account, since my account is mainly arts focused. I do have an NP2 Ibuki, but man, having a 100% NP battery is going to be something that's real hard to argue against the utility of. Plus, you know, her like mods or whatever are fairly decent. But the one thing that I do want to mention for newer players is that I was able to find a video that I will link in the description because this might be relevant to people, where they were able to get their Nitocris Avenger over here to loop without having their own Castoria. They plug suited in a friend Castoria and then use Zhu Fu and their own Proto Merlin to get things kind of going with Black Grail. So no starting charge CE, no, you know, own personal Castoria was able to get that done. That's very impressive, right? On top of having the utility of just having 100% battery, which could be really good going into, say, like a 90++ quest where you just need somebody that can clear a wave, but you don't know if you can rely on them to, you know, give themselves their own NP. 100% battery is always going to be very strong. And then finally, I'm not going to say what people call Sitanai, but you already know. You already know why she's down here, right? I don't think I really gotta explain why this servant is not exactly ranking super highly. But yeah, that took a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I just wanted to make sure that I, you know, went over every servant in a little bit of detail so nobody felt like, oh, I'm going to be going for Galatea. Can you, like, explain why you're putting it there? I like to make sure that I give my reasonings and everything. And it's fine. You're free to disagree in the comments down below. But at the very least, let's at least try to keep it mutual. You know, let's try to keep it kind of civil down there. Because at the end of the day, this is just to help out newer players and give them an idea as someone who's been playing this game for, what, like 7-8 years at this point? You know, my perspective, if I was jumping into the game, what I would really like to see from my account. I think if you go with, realistically, anybody from, like, here on, as a new player, I mean, you should already be picking Waiver from your free ticket from Fuyuki, but if you didn't, you can now pick them up there. But realistically, a lot of these servants can really help you out. Obviously, if you're a dead new, you know, player, some of these other servants like Nitocris Avenger are probably going to be more high value. Just getting somebody that's a wave clearer is going to be insane for you, but you know, Ku Alter loses a little bit of value because obviously if you're trying to solo through the game, you don't want to do your own solos. You can just bring a friend. So there's stuff like that in the comments that you can kind of get into the weeds of, but I'll let you guys do that in there. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask me on my live streams where I go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at about 5 p.m. Central Time to 6 p.m. Central Time is generally when we start, unless I have friends or family that are trying to do something, in which case I will try to notify people in the Discord, which is linked in the description down below. I will notify you guys if I don't go live. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace! Actually, short addendum at the very end of this video, I forgot to mention this. For the month of October, we're going to be doing watch parties in the Discord for all of the Patreons. So if you want to go down in the description down below and watch some scary movies with your boy, as I absolutely hate scary movies, right? I am an absolute baby. And so I'm like, you know what can I do that'd be fun to do with all the patrons, you know, people that are supporting the channel, going that extra mile. I'm like, all right, we'll watch some scary movies for October. The two movies I have picked out for the next 2 weeks is that this weekend we're going to be watching the original Aliens, which I'm not looking forward to. And then the week after that, we're going to be watching The Thing, the good one, I think from the 80s, I believe that one, not the remake and not the super, super old one. So we're going to watch those. And if you have any other suggestions, feel free when you're able to get into the Discord once you join the Patreon, because it'll give you a little exclusive access invite to one of the channels. You can let me know what movie you guys want to watch in there. So yeah, with all that being said, now I'm going to go ahead and actually get out of here. You guys have yourselves a good one. Just wanted to throw that out there for the month of October.